We are live. Greetings and welcome to the podcast, Happy Dance's Guide to the Revolution. Super excited to have you on. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, man, I'm really excited to be here, man. It's the hype is real. I'm Meir. I work in like the blockchain industry. So I work in like a weird sector of the blockchain industry that I work for big banks who want to make their own blockchains instead of use the public blockchains.
Mm-hmm.
But it pays me, and it gives me a chance to work very closely with technology that I'm really into. Um, I'm also just someone who's like really into politics for a long time, or more like I feel like most revolutions that I've seen in my lifetime, like I've heard of the American Revolution, but I've seen many revolutions like start and fail because they've come to the energy that it's time for a revolution, but they don't have a plan in place. So then they revolution, and then they're just like, well, the only infrastructure we have is the same infrastructure. So let's just do that while we figure out a plan. And then, well, now your momentum's lost and you're locked in the same infrastructure. Right. So I've had an interest in a while after seeing things like that in like how you can kind of repurpose a kind of like build a shadow of the current government that abstracts it in a way that you just have a new government. Right. And that's the kind of revolution that I'm looking for.
Yes. And I think that was a really good introduction, and I'm hoping we can get into all of that and more. But before we do that, I have a couple housekeeping things that I want to touch on.
Really?
First thing I want to do is give a shout out to our most recent donor to the GoFundMe, which happens to be my mother. So shout out to my mom, Barb Crawley.
Ooh, get it.
Getting a donation there from her. That's exciting. I know she's always supported me, so it's no surprise that she's supporting me here too. So thanks, Mom. You rock. And the next thing is kind of a housekeeping thing that I like to do with everyone is like how we know each other. And actually we don't, which this is the first time I've had anybody on the podcast with someone that I don't actually know. But we have a mutual friend in Sean Champion, and I've known Sean since Penn State. He and I had all of the same classes together our first semester of freshman year, and even did like orientation with him. And he was kind of like a big brother to me in that early part of Penn State. He was a couple years older than me, and I looked up to him. And I mean, Sean, he's one of the coolest people I've ever met.
One of the coolest people I know, hands down.
Hands down. And he's one of those people too that like as close as we were then, even though we don't keep in touch all the time, like anytime I shoot him a message about something or he shoots me a message about something, like I know he's got my back, like I know he's doing cool, interesting things, and no surprise there, So I take it Sean from Penn State as well and other things?
Yeah. So I met him at Penn State. My roommate at the time he did like a program before school that you camp out with some people who are already enrolled. And so yeah. And so my roommate was a counselor on that. And so when he came into school, he was like coming to my apartment to like hang. And so we actually first really like my first time really looking at him and being like, holy shit, we're going to be friends for life was he messaged me and was like, let's go visit your roommate like up in Vermont randomly in like 3 months. And I was like, oh yeah, sure. Like, let me know. And then like he randomly just called me and was like, hey, by the way, I'm 10 minutes outside of your work. Like, we're going to Vermont, and it was the best time,
Yeah, he's awesome. Such like a free person, like I've never seen him like get overly stressed about anything or like overly worried about anything. He just always kind of keeps like an even keel and like is fun to be around, and just generally like an awesome person. So it's cool that he was able to connect us.
Yeah, I'm so thrilled.
Yeah. So Penn State, and then we're going to jump back to what you were working with. But before we do that specifically, what's your feel on like what I'm doing here and kind of the Declaration of Interdependence and this podcast and this movement that we're trying to push forward? Like any general comments or questions or anything that's like unclear or anything that you want me to kind of touch on before we dive into some of your areas of expertise and how they think they connect with all this?
No, I really dig it. I'm someone who personally struggles with like, you learn a lot of things, and it's important to learn a lot of things, but learning a lot of things means nothing unless you can express it in a way that other people understand. And
Right.
getting like the expressive side of like the learning side is my weakness, so it's always great to like have an opportunity like this presented to me that helps me open up and helps you explore topics. And I think putting people together in a forum like this that they can really feel free to explore their thoughts can
Mhm.
only benefit, public discourse.
Yes, exactly. And I'm excited to talk to you because you're one of the first people that I've had a chance to talk to who has a lot of experience working with blockchain. Because I
Yeah,
think I'm not an expert in it. I know like maybe this much about it, um, but I feel like it's like the key to doing what we're talking about here. It's the way
yeah.
to track all of the like the votes or the contributions and everything kind of can be run through that maybe. At least that's how I'm imagining it. So
It's got there's two sides to every coin, and there's certainly a beautiful end of blockchain that it's very transparent. So one of the really nice things that you could do is you could tell, someone says they have this much money and like they've proven it to you, and you don't have to like wonder, well, like, will he actually have enough money to pay me back? Like, it.
right.
And if an organization, if someone gets hacked, it's really fun. You can watch it live. Like once there was these bad guys who started hacking a contract and stealing money from it, and so then these good guys figured out that that was happening and started hacking the contract faster to try to steal the funds first so that they could give it back. And meanwhile, like these things are labeled and you're watching it in real time as like these funds
Whoa.
are drained, and it's like you feel like you're really part of the world because everything's very visible. You're very much a part of like what's going on,
Mhm.
which is a really neat factor for technology.
Yeah. And when I first reached out to you and kind of let you know what I was trying to do, and
Yeah.
I wrote down one of the things you said, that technological revolution can take place by coordinating outside of our established governance and submitting our agreed upon decisions to the governance binding that currently exists, and then abstract our current decision making, and eventually that would simply be the new bindings. And I think
Totally.
you pretty much nailed exactly what I'm talking about with that. That we can use things like Ethereum or blockchain, not Ethereum, I guess, but
No, in my case, Ethereum very much is. I I
that's
think it's the
right.
one. But yeah. I mean, it could be anyone, but
Anyway,
Ethereum.
but and then the other word that you used was fractalized republic. More
Yeah.
fine-tuned control of where individuals delegate their voice. And I think
Mhm.
that also nails what I'm talking about. First of all, I'm obsessed with fractals. So anytime anybody builds
Yeah.
fractals into what we're talking about, I'm like, yes, yes, that.
Yes. Yes. Of course. How can we integrate it? And you know, I just feel like democracy in general is saying, like, you have democracy, and that's the ideal to an extent. But democracy has inherent risks in terms of like mob behavior and everything. So instead, we say, we can't have a bunch of people who are ignorant about things making decisions. So how about they let us know who they trust to make this decision, and that person will make that decision for us. But the problem is when this whole system was created, and it's not a problem at the time, it was a great solution. They said, let's elect, several people representing us to go and we'll choose them and they'll speak as our voice.
Yes.
And, there are things said, I don't know if it's a real quote or not, but that like there's more information in the New York Times than someone in the 1900s got in a whole year or something,
Right.
loosely. And so if you look at that as the case, well, then if I'm picking a representative and now I'm picking a representative to represent me in 100 years more worth of information, why am I not choosing more representatives to more finely represent the specific information that I think that they agree with me on?
Right.
And I think breaking down those decisions is really the direction that we should be headed rather than, a push for full democracy. I think democracy has its flaws in terms of a lack of knowledge, but everyone, you still want to give them the ability to distribute their trust to people they actually trust and allow that trust to be redelegated from there. Like if I trust you about something, I might give you my trust, but you might trust someone else a little more and say, I defer my knowledge to this other person. And that allows you to really chain things. You don't have to know the expert. You just have to know the first step of the journey.
Right. And that reminds me of something I talked about in episode number 2 with Jerry, that once titled Become the Dragon, was kind of this idea I have for sort of replacing the Senate with experts. So instead of like a general purpose politician and having 100 general purpose politicians, instead have specific experts in specific industries there at the table when you're making legislation, when you're trying to decide how to shape policy, having them right there in the room, and then further having those experts be self-elected through experts,
Yeah, so you would probably be really interested in this particular decentralized autonomous organization called Colony. And what they're doing is they're experimenting with governance through participation. It's this really cool model where basically there is like a task manager who's elected. Like that part is more, this person approves the tasks.
Okay.
And you have to set that up initially. And so that person might not have great rep in something, but that person can assign things into different categories. And once it's in a different category, well, then people in that category can assign it to a subcategory if they want, and it can keep branching down. Mm-hmm. And basically, if you fulfill a task in that category and it's accepted into the hive, then you've earned reputation within the colony for that task. And so then you are able to make decisions for that task with as much rep as you've acquired from fulfilling those tasks for the colony. And one of the really neat aspects that I really appreciate about it is that if you don't use your rep, or if you're not still working in the colony, it starts to decay over time. So it won't all disappear, but you lose your influence if you're not an active participant. And so there are a lot of neat models for organizing people through any kind of experiment you could think of, which is the best part.
So that colony piece, where is that? Is that just like sort of like game theory, or they're actually doing it somewhere? Or
so it is a real thing that exists currently on Ethereum mainnet. You could spin up your own colony. It would cost like a little bit of gas, which you would pay in Ether, and Ether is just the fuel that you pay for computation within the network. Mm-hmm. And so basically you say, hey, I want a bunch of people to run a computer program for me, spin me up a colony, and I don't have to worry about paying AWS or spinning or like creating a website or anything. Like, just create me a colony, and it will spin that up for me. Like, you can make a website if you want, but like you don't have to. Huh. And so now you tapped into this decentralized contract that's available, and it spins you up a colony that has this rule set, and then you plug and play with that rule set to give access to people, revoke access to people, invite them into the colony. Maybe you need to kick someone out of the colony. There's a neat mechanism called rage quit, where if you've invested in a so I don't know if this is a mechanism of colony specifically, but it's very popular in DAOs these days, which is like, I've given X amount of contribution to participate, and now I don't like what you're doing, so I want to leave. But just to prevent that from being spammed and being used as like an abusive tactic not to pay for things you don't like, there's like a tax applied. So you could rage quit, but you pay for the privilege. And normally it's like low, but like enough that you're like, I'm not just going to spam this.
To do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Huh. That sounds really cool. I'm going to have to look into that. And it's brilliant what people come up with and how this decentralized strategies work and how effective they can be.
It's really amazing.
Yeah. So are you familiar with any other ways that blockchain is being used in democracy currently?
So there's a lot of experiments with the main detractor really from being used is the identity problem. Ultimately, blockchains have what's known as oracles, which feed information from off the chain. Like, it can perfectly execute and own assets that aren't digitally native, let's say. They exist on the blockchain initially. But if they exist off the blockchain, then someone is telling the chain. And so it becomes a really interesting bit of game theory that exists there.
Where you kind of lost me there a little bit. It's
I lost myself a little bit, honestly, sometimes. But sorry, so what specifically are you asking again?
So places where blockchain technology is being used currently in...
Yeah, so a big problem with it not being used in democracy is that you can't really identify people, or there's not really a pure system yet. There's a lot of current experimentations around identifying people, but most of that is not really done on chain yet with real governments. Mostly it's just like experimental governance, like there are charity funds that are DAO run. There are the central bank of cryptocurrency, basically. Like it's the decentralized bank of cryptocurrency, maybe a better word. There's basically a bank that issues its own currency that is, it's, or, I don't want to get too deep into it, but basically they issue their own currency, and that currency's issuance schedule and all of the mechanics around it are governed by a decentralized organization of maker token holders who, if one of the, since they're issuing this currency, if the backing of their currency fails, it'll issue more of the maker token that they vote with and dilute the supply, making them less valuable. So they're incentivized to make sure that the system runs well so that they don't end up losing value or like having a big inflation moment.
Yeah. Let's back up to this kind of anonymous piece of the puzzle here, because I think that's kind of an interesting problem, because kind of the way when I think about this, I envision something where it's almost like a social media platform for democracy. But so your account would be tied to like your voter ID. So you would you would either have a voter ID or be issued a voter ID, and then all of your votes would be tracked through, I guess, blockchain, so it's secure and trackable.
Totally.
However, like when you go to the voting booth now, it is anonymous. Like people don't know who you vote for. Like you can tell them, but you can also lie. So I'm kind of wondering whether like should we keep it that way if we're making the rules and setting? Do we keep it that way, or what? Maybe your votes are anonymous, but like your feedback and stuff is not anonymous, or maybe like your user ID is like known, but it's not like tied to a specific person. Like I'm thinking about how to best do that. I'm wondering what you think.
Totally. Well, one of the big problems with just digital voting is that if I vote from my phone at home, a lot of people view that as convenient, but that could also lead to a lot of kidnapping scenarios, a lot of scenarios where employers withhold employees in buildings until they vote for their chosen candidate. There are all kinds of scenarios where if you are not guaranteed the privacy while voting, that someone can be looking and can be enforcing that decision for you. So a big part of securing and ensuring that people aren't being, led to vote a specific way, the voting booth is actually a really useful public good.
Huh. I see what you're saying. It's like, because you can vote anywhere, anytime, someone who wants you to vote a certain way might try to force you to do that because it's
sees you're on your phone's unlocked, steal your phone, vote. Like there's all kinds of things that can happen there when people are frankly very energized by voting and often get a little excited about it.
Sure. Well, I guess I thought things like your fingerprint scan on your phone or the facial recognition combined with your password. Like I thought a lot of that was probably more secure than voting booths anyway. I mean, when you show up at a voting booth right now, what do you have to show? Like your ID in some places?
Yeah. Well, so there's trade-offs, right? So you are more secure at a voting booth as a person because the greatest security in the world, people like to imagine $1 million computers hacking away, but really you grab a $5 wrench, you come over, you bash someone's knees in, and you say, give me your password. And, they're giving you your password very cheap to extract very well-kept secrets. So there does become like a large economy around custody of like the keys to your identity, as well as like your wallet, your bank account, all kinds of things. And so I think it's still just too young of a economy to really be able to like really vote in, but eventually definitely. Things like quadratic voting, where the things that you vote on with more weight, count more effectively. Basically, like you spend more of your vote on this, and it shows that you really care. I think solutions like that are being experimented with in the Ethereum community, in the blockchain community at large, and there's going to be some really cool stuff coming out with all kinds of quadratic apply.
I've heard that concept before. That's pretty interesting because I found that a lot of people if they're not single issue voters, they're damn close. Like they have like 2 or 3 things that they really care about, and most of the other stuff they're either like ignorant and therefore don't really have like an educated opinion, or just not interested at all, you know?
I think it's a problem of this non-fractalized voting. You have one opinion you care more about than anything else, right? And you
Right.
might care a lot about all those other things, but like you're only picking one guy. So you're picking the guy who agrees with you about that one thing.
Right.
And like all the other things by default just become less important to you because like it doesn't matter who you pick because like they're not actually caring about these issues anyway. You end up forcing it into this one issue that really means the most to you. And if you were choosing more candidates, then you would actually see, I think, people be more informed about more nuance because they could actually participate in that.
Yes.
Like,
and I think an objection might be that you're kind of strategies like this further complicate things, right?
Yeah.
But then maybe that's what we need, you know? Maybe in a sense it complicates it, but in other ways it simplifies it, you know? Because now I don't have to be informed on 15 different issues. I can be informed on the issues that I'm already semi-informed about, and
you can pass your vote along. So like the best part is if it's not just one layer, right? So like if I can only elect one person, then I still have to be really informed about every topic.
right.
But if I can just pass that on to my brother or my cousin or like my, whoever and say, I trust you on this topic, you're my closest trust source. And then that person can keep redelegating it until someone chooses to participate. So you could have a vote where, well, this particular decision, we're having 50 elected members who have enough voting weight to like participate or whatever, or like who are here to participate. But like in another vote, you might have a lot more. There might be a lot more nuanced decisions. And you might see things that people don't care about as much just kind of grow to someone who's willing to do the work. But what would be really curious about such a model is how do you pay for that, right? Like, so there needs to be some kind of funding model tied to all these kinds of things. Because ultimately, if you want to pass along the responsibility of being ultra-informed, and being ultra-informed is one thing, but then taking that information and passing it off to the public and giving them information in a way that they can receive is effort. And I think that if you don't reward that, you're going to get people who aren't good at it doing that job.
Right. And it also sort of takes away some of the incentive to be ultra-informed, too.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? It's like kind of frustrating when, I don't know, let's just say someone's like super into candidate X, and I'm just like, whatever, I kind of like candidate Y, and then I vote for candidate Y, and they vote for candidate X, and they basically cancel each other out, even though I barely cared, and they cared a whole lot, you know? It's like, how do you balance fairness and democracy with like also practicality and weighting things appropriately, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it gets really difficult to balance that. I think that's really like the line that practicality exists on is really fucking thin. And it's just that I think the biggest problem is really that we've reached an age where we have so much information.
Yeah.
And so as a society, we're very used to looking at the information and saying, hey, this is what it is. And, we had the encyclopedia and we looked it up and we said, this is truth. And so now we're at an age where there's so many sources of information and so many varying opinions, and not to say that they don't all have some form of merit, not that, some are definitely trolling, but like ultimately, we've lost touch of scale. Like science involves a certain amount of peer review, and other things also involve a form of peer review in terms of, well, if one guy is shouting on Twitter X, why is that on the news as there's a problem, Democrats or Republicans or, flat earthers are yelling about X. And it's like, I mean, maybe they are, but like, you're showing me one guy. Is that like a thing? And so as a society, we've stopped really denoting scale. Because we're not used to comparing so many things. So we found a comparison, let's jump it. But now there's a million comparisons. Like you can actually talk with nuance, but people
Yes.
instead try to mix these scales. And so I think any kind of news source that limits the scaling, or at least informs of the scaling, as well as maybe trust networks. So trust networks are going to be a really cool thing to come either out of blockchain or just out of the future. You know, like
Is that what you're
maybe
talking about, where you kind of like assign someone your trusted? Is that what you're talking about? The same thing you're talking about?
so it's a little, so they're different but the same. So like that would be particularly focused on governance. But a trust network is very similar. You're passing your trust around, but you might like the distributions might be different, the way that you pass it around, the way that you segment markets. But ultimately, you're saying, I trust this person to know. Yeah, yeah. So it's very similar. Just one's more political and one's more source based. So it's saying, I trust the New York Times to talk about climate change or whatever. You know, I don't. And so then you could see that I am seeing an article by person, and it seems like literally no one trusts them about this. And so maybe I shouldn't believe
Ah,
that.
I see.
Because social media has the problem that there are fake accounts, and this fake account might have 1,000 friends, and that fake account might have one friend in common with me. And now Facebook is like, hey, you want to see y'all share a friend? Like, this guy's real. He's got 1,000 friends, and it's like, but none of those people affect my life at all. So
Right.
why do I care if they validate this person's opinion? And so if you limit, like this, I'm going to get a lot, like, I don't think this is very widespread opinion. I don't pretend it is, but like, I believe that like, if you segregate, you are already a natural filter. You don't know everything. You know what people you trust tell you. And you're already playing that game of,
Right.
I trust you. But it's not explicit in the digital world, where in the physical world, if a random dude walked up to you and was like, hey, did you know that, Pizzagate happened? You'd be like, oh, word, you're nuts, and just like go on with your day. But when you
Right.
see it on the internet, suddenly it looks the same as every other article. And so we need a new way of distinguishing, do I trust this person? And a lot of that in the real world, in the physical world, as far as I'm concerned, is through people you know and people you already trust and who they've introduced you to as knowledgeable about these things.
This is a kind of a good transition into something I got in an argument with a couple of people the other day. Not like an argument, but like
Totally.
kind of like a discussion. We were kind of on different sides of it. Basically, we were talking about Facebook and how like there's not really any accountability for acting like an asshole on Facebook. Like,
Huh.
not really. I mean, there is and there isn't.
I mean, but should there be?
Well, that's kind of what I was getting at is like it'd be nice if there was like more. And I don't understand the negatives of this kind of argument I'm about to present, but what if there was more data and more ways to track? And I don't mean track as in like observe, but like record their. I'm not doing a good job of explaining this. Basically, like here's a good example. I was using basketball as an analogy. I don't know if you watch basketball, but you'll get the idea.
I'm a fan.
Like you can watch like 4 minutes of a random game and watch player X miss like 4 shots in a row, you know?
Mhm.
And you might think, oh, player X is a bad player. They're not good, you know? But then if you look at like the game stats or the season stats or like their career stats, you're going to get a whole new picture on this player, you know?
Yeah.
They might have just missed 4 shots in a row. Just like if someone kind of says something rude on Facebook to somebody, is this something that they do all the time? Are they rude to everyone all the time? Or are they just being rude right now? You know? Like
Yeah.
when someone like trolls me or trolls somebody, like, are they a known troll? Should I be taking them seriously? Because it's like it's hard because you get criticism. You go out on a limb and you express something that you believe in, and
Totally.
you get some criticism, and it's like hard not to take it to heart, you know. But
Totally.
if I knew this person, which I don't, you know, because whatever, for some reason I'm friends with people on Facebook that I don't know. That's a whole other problem. Maybe. Maybe I would know that they're just a shit starter. They're just trying to get a rise out of me and like away. And I'm kind of going down a rabbit hole here. And stop me if I'm sounding.
Yeah, totally.
But like, let's say there's a post and it has like 50 comments on it, you know,
Mhm.
and it's something that you're interested in. So you go and you read the post and you read the comments. And let's say you don't even comment, but you like absorb the information. You read it.
Mhm.
What if you were prompted with like a kind of like a little mini survey and it said like in this person's like comment, like rate them on like their politeness or their knowledgeability of the subject or their willingness to be humble and have some humility on the subject. And then like rather than just like liking it or like you don't even have a thumbs down anymore, but like there's no way to like give feedback in a way that's like that you can kind of have a total weighted average of your online presence, you know?
Well, I think in some senses followers do that, but it's easy to buy followers, so it's not a true measure. So like you can't really compare yourself to others, especially because growth rates are very sporadic through viral, freaks of nature. You can't really necessarily control how you spin out, but generally, like if you look at someone's post and you think, "Whoa, that was really insightful," or whatever, that was really funny, whatever, you might say, "I'm going to follow that person." And I think that is one of the better metrics of self-valuing yourself is our accounts that don't look like bots who pass by my content tuning in. And I think for other people, it's much harder because you don't know. You don't know how many of those are bots and how many are not. And did they pay for bots and did they not? And did they just buy the account? Because you don't actually know their history. So blockchain actually does approach that problem through reputation systems, where it tries to say that you're incentivized to keep this account for a longer period of time because then you'll have more rep. And if you have more rep, then you can do more things. And so like if you do more things and have more power, you wouldn't want to just make a bunch of tiny accounts where like no one knows who you are and then you can't have power in this. It's all playing these like random incentive games.
Yeah.
But decentralized social media is something that's coming. In the future, you may be able to only limit your content to certain addresses. So you might be able to self-host your content and limit who can view that content to people who have certain access tokens. And then you could possibly make it public, open to everyone, and someone be visiting and you say you need a minimum of X rep in the system and not be this person. Right. And they might keep coming back, but like they'll have to keep grinding for that minimum rep, and then you end up in a situation where you feel them much less often.
I see. Yeah, and like I'm trying to be careful not to like isolate myself in what is it called? The positive reinforcement cycle that people get in. It's like, well, I think this, and I'm friends with all these people that think the same thing, so therefore I must be correct what I'm thinking, and therefore people who don't think that are wrong. Like I really try to, like, for example, if I post something and someone comes on and like disagrees with me, like I don't want to delete their comments. Like I don't want to defriend them. I don't want to block them. But if they're being like blatantly an asshole, like intentionally, then like I almost feel like I have to.
Well, so there are two kinds of. It's basically you have to assess: is this person discussing with you in good faith? Right. And that's really difficult to assess over the internet. But basically, if they're acting in good faith, then if you've rolled the dice and you decided to engage them, then like you're going to have a really productive time. But if they're not engaging in good faith, in which case words don't really have meaning, then it's very easy for them to craft what they say because they're not caring while all of the effort is on you. And so if you find that people aren't actually, like I say, always make the first engagement. If you feel like something is worth engaging, throw it out there, say yes. But you have no obligation on the internet to respond to anybody. And so if you feel that they respond to you in a way that doesn't address what you're talking about or doesn't at least make a good faith effort to address it, then nice talking to you, bud, if you want, or just disappear, because you don't owe that to them. And ultimately, if you're seeking a good faith effort, they're not delivering it back.
Yep. And kind of to go back to the basketball analogy, especially if it's your post, like if you make a post and it's weird because like no one's keeping score here on social media, but it's like we're playing a game as if we were keeping score, especially if you're having an argument, like you're presenting their argument, you're addressing their points, So if, like,
you're looking at who gets more likes,
Right.
No, more people liked him.
Yeah. So like if it's my post, then I kind of have to play like referee, sort of.
Yeah. You do.
So it's basketball, and I said I want to play basketball in my post. People come in and say, "Well, this is this part of basketball, and this is this part." But then someone comes in and they're just like throwing like flagrant fouls. They're not playing basketball. Then like
People
it's
doing
kind of
that.
my responsibility to be a referee and just like eject them from the game, whether it's me
Totally.
reading their comments or defriending them or blocking them. And like I think a referee in a game doesn't do that lightly, and I don't do that lightly. You know?
No, I think that internet moderation is something that has basically evolved into an art form in that it is very much a. There are no books that I'm aware of on internet modding. It's not ever really a job. It's always just like, well, I want to have a community, so now I gotta sweep it up. And so it's really uncharted territory for the
Yeah.
long sense. But I would say that the best thing to do often is to like DM someone with a warning. I think a lot of times people try to publicly warn people, and any time you get a public warning, you're reacting like Iran is about to now. Bro, you just publicly blew up my vice president. Like, I'm going to be fucking mad.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be mad because if I don't, then I look weak to everyone else. And so someone's already amped up. You don't you don't escalate. And so I find that the best de-escalation tactic is to reach out in a DM, particularly if you're friends with them, if you have that ability. Like sometimes you don't, and then you just have to go the harder route. But I would try to lead with that and say, hey man, like listen, like this is my page. I'm trying to keep it like a more friendly zone. Like if you really want to continue with this guy, like I recommend DMing. And if it doesn't work out, like you two can figure your thing out.
Yeah.
They're both human. You're not sending an attack dog after someone. Like if they DM someone and is like, hey, we're arguing and the moderator told me to, argue with you in here. And they're like, I don't want to argue. Okay, well, like I'll either try to continue to argue and you'll block me and like it's over in 2 messages or so, or you continue your conversation because you were both engaged and liked it. But like you two have to make that decision. And the best way to prompt that is to say, take this to your DMs, you guys are engaging now. This is not a communal engagement.
Right.
And try to focus on that you guys are having your own conversation now. Please sidebar.
Right. Yeah.
But I don't moderate too much. I don't moderate communities. I just, watch moderators creepily.
Yeah. And I think a lot of too about the fact that we as people kind of come from these tribal communities.
Mm-hmm.
When you look like prehistory and, I don't know, 10,000 years ago or longer than that, I forget what it's called, but I think the number is 150. And that's like the number of people that you can easily remember. And they theorize that it's like the size of the tribe or the community that we kind of evolved into,
Yeah.
And I think about that when I think about social media and how many people that I'm friends with or how many people other people are friends with and like who I really know there. And like, if someone in your 150 person community was throwing flagrant fouls, like you wouldn't want to like eject them from the game because you kind of need them, you might need them. They're a part of your community,
Totally. But like at the same time, if your friend is being a giant dick at a bar, like yelling at people, like you still want that person to be your friend tomorrow morning, but at the same time, like you want to protect them from making a fool of themselves to some extent, and you also want to protect their reputation. And if you feel like they're not in an ability to maintain that, you either think that they are that scummy, or you think that they're having a moment that you recognize that this is a distinct moment from how you usually act. And so, hey man, like you're acting different right now. And so I'm going to like seize this moment to address you, pull you into my attention span and rebind you to a new thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've been really big lately on, JavaScript has a concept called bind that like blew my mind when I learned it. It's basically you can bind this to that. And it's like you take, you have a thing and it does stuff, but it does stuff depending on what's in it. So whatever that is in this, then like it'll do this specific thing. But if a different this is in it, it'll do something else. Like a character has a context in a video game. It either has like really high speed or really high magic or whatever. And so like those stats are your context, and depending on what context it's fed in, then it does something different. And so like I had a dude once who, like, I feel like if you sudden, it's got to be like a quick draw of attention. And then once you have a quick draw of attention, then suddenly they're looking, and then you do like a kind of gentler, like, hey man, like, I think it would be best to move this way and then talk. And I think always like talk about where you're going and then talk, because talking about going somewhere generally triggers something in someone, like, oh, we're not doing this here, and that means something to everyone societally. Like, we're gonna move somewhere else before that, like, triggers something in everyone's heads. Like, then it's not cool here. What's not cool? And people immediately start kind of this self question of like, am I chill? And then you just kind of guide them into a new chill. Like, hey, but we're gonna like try to do something, whatever, you know.
Guide them to a new chill. I like that. So I don't want to jump subjects, but I kind of do because you brought up Iran. What do you think about all that's going on right now?
Bro, it's nuts. Like, I'm very torn about this whole thing because ultimately I feel like Trump is obviously a criminal, and he obviously has a pattern of doing things, and he obviously overreacts anytime someone does anything negative about him. And so like at this point, like, blowing up that dude was fucked because we go after terrorists and that's chill. But once you cross the line into nation state, particularly nation state which owns a terrorist network, you, particularly a nation state which owns a terrorist network, which is friends with Russia and friends with North Korea and friends with China because the US is pushing them out of all of their other friendships. And so, you know, Russia's got their nukes. You know, China doing, I don't even know, they're just like gonna fuck us. But they're mad. You know, they probably fund some things. At the very least, they would pay for some shit. And, you know, North Korea is working on nukes as well. Now, if you have Iran being really pissed, like basically, like, if you believe that Trump is a Russian asset, for whatever reason, you know, he doesn't have to know it. You know, for whatever reason, Russia wanted him there. And for whatever reason, Russia's feeding him information that leads him to do their bidding. Like, what was our plan? And that's really all I want in a government, is if I make a drastic move, I want to have a plan. I want to know where we're taking this. Like, I don't want to just, like, randomly kill someone from space on a dime who's the vice president. Basically, he's the second highest person in the country of Iran, like, from space in a different country. So, like, it's one thing you killed them in the U.S., like, oh, you visited us, haha, we got you, like, you shouldn't have entered our house. But it's like, we're a guest in Iraq's house. They're already all like, you know, it's a bit weird. You guys invaded us. You're staying. Like, there's terrorists. Like, there's not. Like, what are you doing? It's already weird. And now we're going to just not tell them. So, like, it's one thing to, like, hey, by the way, we're killing this person now. It's another thing for them to be like, what the fuck, this airfield just blew up. Like, what the fuck just happened? Who just shot him? Like, what the fuck's going on? Let's scramble. And then be like, oh, it was our allies? America? You just killed our neighbors? Like, imagine if someone just killed Mexico's vice president randomly for, like, a random street stabbing that occurred in London, and Britain was pissed and was like, all right, we're just going to kill Mexico's vice president. Like, that would be weird to us, especially if, like, they did it while they were visiting the U.S. and then they're like, here, we're going to kill your neighbor here. Like, now you're socially pressured. You have to do something because you live next to this guy. Like, the U.S., they might be here, they might not be here, I don't know, but I live next to Iran. And so if they kill his president here in my house, I am obligated to now act in a way that pushes the U.S. out. And so, like, now let's take another step back, right? So, like, we just decided that let's pull out of Syria on a dime. Let's not tell anybody. Let's make sure that nobody has a plan for what to do. Cool. One night, let's call, let's pull out, we'll make an announcement. The next day, hey, we're already gone. Cool. So now we've destabilized an area of Syria where we have allies. What does that project to any potential allies in the Middle East? Because everyone in that area has been fighting alongside the Kurds for a long ass time. They all know each other. Their grandmas gossip. And so you just pulled out of fucking Kurdistan with no notice. And so already you've sent a signal to everyone in that region that don't trust us. If we ask you for your help in fighting whoever we're about to fight in this area, we'll pull out of you on a dime, and we won't even tell you. And then we back that up, not 3 months later, I don't know timelines, but like very soon later, we say, hey, Iraq, don't worry about the Kurds. Like, we would never do that to you, just like do crazy shit without telling you, oh, yeah, by the way, let's blow up your neighbor without, like, we're constantly signaling to them, don't trust us, right? So if I were trying to start a war with Iran because I wanted to, because I had a plan, I would not pull out of Syria. I would not make all of the people in the region know that I will not honor my deals. I would maintain Syria because Syria is the padding on the other side of Iraq. So even if Iraq isn't able to kick us out, well, now Turkey is one step closer, and Turkey is very much aligned with Iran. So Turkey now owns Syria, basically, because Syria, we left as a hellhole. That was like the shell of what ISIS had done to it. And the one place that kind of had something going for it, we had this Kurd area, and they got wiped basically immediately after we left. We like threatened sanctions, but like not really like, oh, well, you just took all the things we told you not to do. But you're cool now? You got everything you wanted and now you're cool? Okay, well, we'll just take away the sanctions then, like, no biggie. So like, we've constantly been signaling that we don't want to win whatever we're about to do here. And that's what scares me the most, is that if there was any competence here, none of these moves make sense in a chronological order. Everyone's justifying them individually, like, oh, sometimes you have to pull out. We can't be at war forever. And like, that sounds great. Like, but if you put it in the context of everything, like, every move has been slowly creeping towards like poking Iran. We know they're going to do something back, right? So like, we blow up their vice president. They hacked Peloton. Like, they hacked a random website. There was like one government website that got hacked. Like, there was like 2 mortar shells fired at a base. So we fucking shoot from space 3 more people. And like, that's what they want. They want us to, right now, right? Like, so if you wanted to break up the American allyship, and I'm sorry if I'm going off. I honestly have so many theories about this. But so like, if you are, if you're America and you want to maintain friendships with your allies, right? You know that they got mad people out here. We're all hanging in this desert together. We're invading everybody together. We're all buddies, us, my European friends, they're like my cousins. I don't, love them, but we go places together. And so like, we're all hanging out in this desert that we came to just like shoot shit. And we're all hanging here and like, by the way, I'm about to start a war right here where all of you guys are, and I'm not going to tell you at all. And we've been making these trade deals, and we've been making these pushes against our allies. We have a trade surplus with Canada, but because we were doing a steel tax and Trump wanted to look cool against Trudeau, he implemented a steel tax against Canada because we had an unfair trade deal with them. But we were on the winning side of that deal, yet we made it worse. Why did we isolate our allies? And so all of our allies are feeling very isolated from us right now. We've been pulling out of all of these pacts that we've been working on for a lot of time. These countries have spent a lot of money trying to figure out how to get a large group of people to work together, which is very difficult. Mm-hmm. And they finally come to an agreement, and Trump breaks them all. He's getting everyone to not be sure that they can trust America. And right when everyone's at peak, I don't know if I can trust America. And Trump gets impeached, and they're like, maybe? Like, what's going on here? And then Trump says, I'm not going to go through any channels of authority, and I've been using my personal lawyer to coordinate international deals, which is already, like, you should not have your personal lawyer coordinating anything. And so then he goes ahead to secretly bomb this shit. Like, it just signals everything that says, I don't actually want to win. and I want to put my allies in the hardest place possible because now it's their reputations on the line. You think Iran's not going to remember if they come out and say, like, we agree with America, and then America comes out and says, we actually didn't have proof of any reason for doing this? So they're all being very quiet right now. No country has come out and Iran, you shouldn't have planned an attack against America, and no country has come out and said, Iran, you should, or America, you shouldn't have bombed Iran, because no one knows how this is about to play out, and no one's sure which side to pick, because America was reliable, and America is who they would have picked. But right now, they're not sure who America is, and America's not sure either. And if we're going to create this super crisis now, when you're picking teams for basketball, if you got a guy puking in the bathroom, like, well, he is our best player, but he is currently vomiting. Maybe I won't pick him first. And so that's kind of the scenario that I feel like we're at in the world right now, where they've forced us into a scenario where they've gotten our star basketball players super drunk, and now they're drafting teams. And they know that everyone's really nervous about picking sides with this guy. And they know that even if, this war with Iran, where's it going to go? Well, they're a terrorist network. So how do you think they're going to attack? They're not going to say, hey, we attacked you. They're going to cyber attack us. Cool. How do we prove it's Iran? Well, we can't. They digitally hid their fingerprints. Great. We're going to be investigating this for 10 months. It has a lot less oomph. You could react right away. We bomb them the next day. Very important. But 9 months later, everyone's like, we could breathe a little bit longer. We've already waited.
Right.
And so at that point, it will be much more difficult to engage with Iran because they'll be doing things that will take us a long time to adhere to them. There'll be a lot of small terrorist attacks, is my prediction, around the world because they have a global terrorist network. And my fear is that they will connect with the Russians and smuggle a nuke somewhere because what they are good at is smuggling weapons around. They're a big terrorist network. That's what terrorist networks do. And what does Russia have? A bunch of fucking rich people with bombs with no connection to the government because all their silos kind of left unlocked. So there's a lot of just not good with this whole situation. And the worst part to me is that the people in charge, Trump in particular, if I felt that he had America's best interest at heart, when people say, what's your exit plan for Iran? He would say, yeah, we thought about that, and this is what we're going to do. But instead he says, I don't need no exit plan. We're America. They're Iran. The Austrians thought that too heading into World War I, and they brought a bunch of fucking horses to a mud fight and just fucking lost. They had all of these old world strategies, and they were fucking a great army for a different kind of war. And I don't think that Trump really understands what a new kind of war is, and I don't think that he really wants it, and I don't think he really knows what he's doing. Other people are taking advantage of the fact that he is very easily baited.
Yeah. And it's all kind of scary. And I think if the reality is that he's stupid, then that's scary. But if it's really what's going on, that all of this was intentional and that there's a grander plan behind and it's not good. It's not good for any of us, then that's even scarier. If you're saying whether he's a Russian puppet or he wants World War III or whatever,
So this is really what I think. I happen to be a proponent of Andrew Yang, and he has a policy that is particularly interesting to me, which is and I forget what he's framing this particular, the democracy dollars is this one.
Yes.
And so democracy dollars,
I think,
is $100 to go earmarked to your politicians. And so if you look at what is Trump, right? What makes Trump valuable? Why would criminals even be attracted to someone who seems to slip so often? And it's because he's very good at not actually claiming anything. Because he never says anything straight, it's very difficult to elude anything to him. And he's laundering money. A lot of his businesses are accused of laundering money. And if you're laundering money, that money wants to go somewhere, particularly to someone influential. And particularly if you can, rent hotels with whatever, You can fake some numbers. And so now, construction more than hotels, sorry.
Yeah.
And he happens to be in construction. But anywho, like, if you are the wheel that launders, right? And he seems to be the wheel. Like, he doesn't seem to be the guy laundering money. He seems to be the guy who's laundering it for people. You know,
Right.
he's opening up a hotel to launder money, not for someone else to do it. You know, and so to me, I interpret him as, I think that's his role. Is he's the launderer, and if you're the launderer, then you're also the guy who's connecting all these people to their things. And so if you drop a money wheel into politics, everyone is so hungry for all of the dollars that it's so easy to get favors, because once you come in with a slight amount of money, you read about these lobbyists paying people like $3,000. Like, people get bought for really little, and this guy can just come in and drop them a lot very easily, and they don't care because they're buying the government. And so, like, people are willing to spend a lot, and these politicians very much need money. And so they're willing to sell their soul for another term. They're willing to look the other way to get this for my state. They're willing to, you know, they're making the deals to make them look good to get elected again. And this is the best path of least resistance to do it. And so if we had a system that they didn't have to beg these individuals for money, if everyone just had enough money to wash that out, then someone who is a wheel of money churning becomes much less dangerous to fall into that position.
Mm-hmm. And you think the democracy dollars that Andrew Yang is talking about would help a lot with that?
So let's say there's 350-ish million people in America, and like 200 million of them are over 18, or I mean, maybe he drops the voting age to 16, whatever. And so he gives 200 million people, right? 200 million people, $100, 100 times 200 million. That's way more money than is currently being spent in politics. Like, people aren't really spending hundreds of millions standard. You know, a lot of it, you know, someone raised like 34 million so far by the fourth quarter. Like,
mm-hmm.
Yeah, significant, but not, you know, $200 billion.
Right. And I learned about the democracy dollars when I think Andrew Yang went on, I don't know, I can't remember whether it was on Joe Rogan's podcast or if they talked about it on Freakonomics, because I definitely heard of this concept from some sort of podcast.
Yeah.
It seemed like a great idea. Would you then also tap like all of the other money?
You don't have to.
You don't have to.
If people are willing to drop that much money on things, they have their freedom of speech. It's their money. Do what you want. But realize that the minimum that you have to spend to really, like, matter, to make it worth selling your soul for, because right now, everyone's selling their soul. It's very easy. You know, well, Bob did it. Alice did it. Are you really going to be mad at me? Who else are you going to get? But once you get enough people who can do this honestly without worrying about the money, then it becomes a lot more obvious when someone's bought, because they're the only one acting irrationally. Whereas right now everyone's forced to act irrationally, and irrational becomes normal, and everyone just looks at it and is like, that's politics. But I think that you get rid of that because you make it the abnormal, and people start making like, oh yeah, that guy gave you a lot of money, and like, that's weird. And then, like, and then you gave that guy a lot of really favorable laws. Well, that's double weird. We never see that happen anymore because everyone just doesn't beg for money. Like, it's amazing how it just changes the basic context by making the good apples able to thrive in a good way.
Right. And simply just taking away the amount of time that they have to spend on fundraising, I think.
Totally. They're going to be in the office so much more, voting on things that matter and reading the bill instead of saying, well, you know, I got the speed notes from my speed reader.
Oh, man. You brought up voting age. Let's talk about that real quick. As I guess a way to kick it off, would you, if given the choice, would you keep it at 18? take 2 years away or put 2 years on or something different?
I think that voting is something that if you are participating in the economy, you should have a voice in it. And if you are getting taxed, you should have a voice in how those taxes are being applied to you. And, to a certain extent, people receiving public services should be able to critique the way that those public services are run. And that doesn't need a fixed age limit for everything. Like, my ideal world might have 18 being it for like a large portion of things, like 18 federally vote, 16 vote in your state so that you can affect your like local state taxes, and more of like your local wage laws is something you can greater participate in, but you don't need to run the country maybe. Like, I don't necessarily think that lowering it for everything, but I think it makes sense to lower it for at least people who are young and working, particularly in an age where the poverty gap is growing. More young people are being pushed into a workforce that's increasingly, Uber style, where these people are being treated as contractors. They're not getting benefits. They're already in the opening jobs in this economy are things that don't treat people like real employees, and so they're already in positions of exploitation. And if that's something that's going to be attracting a lot of young workers, we should definitely seek to empower them to criticize those laws and help improve them for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't necessarily think that they need to be making the decision for president, but definitely the rules that affect them.
Yeah. I think you make a great point about just to simply like no taxation without representation.
Yeah, like that's the basis of our country.
Paying taxes, and why shouldn't you have an influence on politics?
How much they're able to take from you. Like, well, 16-year-olds, we're just going to take all of it because, like, we decided this year. Oh, well, you have no say.
Right. Interesting. And then what do you think about how they bumped up the age to buy tobacco products to 21? You think that was a good move, or?
I think that they're just so tobacco has this weird relationship, and like I might tangent a little on this, but I'm really gonna try not to. But like, there's this weird thing about identifying as fighting something that when the battle ends or alters, it's really hard to give up a part of your identity. Like, there are people who are passionate about something. Mm-hmm. And if you're passionate about something, you are really into this thing, and that thing interacts with new things, and that brings you to other ideas. Then you think about, how does this interact with that? You're very much expanding your interests. Where like you might be against smoking and passionate about being against smoking, but then you run into other things that might be bad for people that you might, balance in priority. You say, we've reached a point with this, so we don't have to worry about that. Maybe I can start worrying about this. But there are some people who are not passionate. They're obsessed. Mm-hmm. And so when you are obsessed, it's very negative and very collapsing. All things that you look at, you think of how it's related to this one interest. So you're actually moving everything back towards you. And so those people, I find, who attach like an obsessive identity to stopping something. It's generally about something that they find very evil, and they become obsessed with stopping it. They can't not. And so you find these people who the article comes out, a bunch of people came in, we're a marijuana is a legal state. 3 of them said that they smoked legal black cartridge marijuana. The rest of them all said they were smoking nicotine. Like, it must be the nicotine, even though these people have been smoking nicotine in this region from these producers for a very long time. It's definitely not the new black market like weed thing, and we're definitely going to take these kids at face value that they're not smoking weed in this place where smoking weed's legal. And so it becomes very easy to dodge the truth, especially when information's coming from people who don't want to be honest. And so you end up where you want this immediate demand. You want to be informed 24/7. Why did we know about it before they knew about it? Like that spurred a large amount of misinformation about the topic. Everyone had opinions without reading the article. Like I read the first article I saw. To me, it was very clear that it was black market THC vape cartridges
Yep.
that likely got cut with something like every other black market drug.
Yep.
And it seems like a very obvious pattern. Like the thing that's illegal is likely the one being poisoned.
Right.
But a lot of people, they need cigarettes to be bad. They need nicotine to be bad because my identity is based around the fact that nicotine shouldn't exist and this evil still exists in the world and I must purge it. And those are the people who pick up on these early release news first. And the early release is always confused. It's always muddled and it's always really easy to spin. And they spun it all the way up into the U.S. government fucking banned nicotine, you know? Like, why? That had nothing to do with anything. And then they backtracked it, and now they're like, well, just the flavored ones, and just for the centralized cartridge producers, Juul, because you specifically were a dick. But all these individual vape juice makers. It's actually a really nice ad for blockchains. You have these big centralized companies that fucking marketed to children and like they're getting slapped by the law, but they are not banning it for these small time makers because there's too many people making nicotine juice in their basement and selling them at fucking street fairs and shit that you can get flavored e-juice. There's nothing they could do to prevent flavored e-juice, so they didn't even try. It's only illegal in e-juice cartridges, but they could use flavor tobacco, flavor menthol. It's not actually tobacco in these things, it's pure nicotine and the flavor of tobacco. But you can't make it the flavor of something else, not because the flavor is bad, but because flavors attract kids. And my thought is that kids are attracted to nicotine. A kid is not fucking itching out like, I need my mint flavor now. You know what the easiest way to get my mint fix is? Go and like steal an ID from someone or like go ask some dude on the street to buy me some nicotine. Like, you know, like no one's going out that hustle. That's so much work for your nicotine, for your mint fix. No, it's for the nicotine. And like everybody likes things that taste good. Like these kids aren't going to stop juuling because, like, oh, now it only tastes like menthol. I can't get mint anymore. Now I can just have menthol. Oh, no. Like, it seems entirely misguided, and what they should be focusing on is why are these kids finding themselves attracted to nicotine? Do they find that nicotine is a slight stimulant? Maybe, like, there's something that they could do to get them a little bit more energized, maybe a little bit more reset. Like, I don't know, but you could plan things if you address that people are being drawn to taking a stimulant. Why is that? Instead of just saying, well, if we just ban flavors, they won't want, like, to me, it just seems like flavors are not why anyone, like, no one just started drinking their parents' booze because they invented whipped cream vodka. Like, it just seems like it's attacking the wrong end of the problem to feel like they're doing something about it because it's a really hard problem to solve because kids have, like, they exist in the world and nicotine exists in the world. And, like, just like you can't prevent your kid from watching porn, like, you can't prevent your kid from getting nicotine if they want it because everyone has a way. We're humans. Like, that's what we do.
Yeah, we find a way. I had a feeling that the law was changed surrounding the cartridges and the flavors and things, but I didn't know that that was like the sole focus of it exactly. But it makes sense because all that stuff's new, and this law kind of came out of nowhere.
Yeah, so they initially tried to do a full ban, and that was just like, nah, because people really like depend on this. Like this is an industry that, I'll be honest, I never smoked cigs. I started vaping because to me, I didn't want to deal with the health, but this is slightly healthier and like whatever. I have, you know, I smoke weed, I smoke this, why not? Like nicotine,
Sure.
like the reason I wasn't was because it was very unhealthy and, you know, then someone was like, hey, this one is less unhealthy and I was like, good enough for me. So I'm sure there are plenty of people like me out there. But there are a ton of people who actually have problems smoking cigs and have actually been helped by these devices, or who would have started smoking cigarettes but instead went to these devices. And those people shouldn't be marginalized just because like you feel that you can't control yourself around a thing. Like, at a certain point there's personal responsibility, and if someone wants to consume a flavored thing, like by all means. Imagine if it was just like you can't taste soda tasting stuff. Like soda, you could sell it. It's gotta taste like bananas. Like, you got me. None of the kids are gonna drink that broccoli sugar because now it's broccoli flavored. It doesn't taste like syrup. It's broccoli. Oh no! Like they're totally gonna stop drinking soda. Like that. I just don't think that's how it works.
Yeah. So back to the original question, bumping it from 18 to 21. Good idea, bad idea?
Bad idea.
Yeah.
If they are already having a problem getting it into like kids' hands, then like raising the age just makes it a more dangerous underground black market. Because you generally, in my experience with drugs, you have like guy who sells to people around their own age. And then you have guy who sells to high school kids. And as you increase that gap between how old that age gap is where that guy can hang out and, you end up making it a creepier and creepier situation that you're forcing it into. Because ultimately, like, people are getting it from, like, that random weird guy they know, Like, I just think that it pushes people into more illegal situations because you're not attacking the root of why they want cigarettes.
Mm-hmm. Would it be better to, this is kind of a crazy question, to just make everything legal?
No, I think that there's
like no age restrictions on alcohol,
I don't think so.
No?
But like, just a quick interesting point before I answer that is that they found that the vaping rate is equal to what the smoking rate was. Like before they've really started pushing anti-smoking, like the same amount of people seem to be attracted to nicotine, which I find interesting. Like maybe if it doesn't kill you and you don't think it's going to kill you, then like about the same amount of people have a disposition for it. But like things should be illegal. There are definitely things that should be illegal. But like, what is illegality? And like, so there are things that are like criminally illegal. Definitely. Like, if you kill me, I want that to be illegal. And basically, the thing that makes, like, I don't think that murder being illegal stops anyone who wants to murder someone from doing it. Like, ultimately. But, like, that one is more of just a signal to society. That's like, yo, everyone, we agree on this. And there are some things that are just so broadly accepted into society that you can make it a law. And it doesn't matter that there are people who don't follow it, because there are people who don't follow everyone. But they're already a small enough portion that you want to signal to everyone that, like, yo, everyone, we agree murder is bad. I want to feel safe knowing wherever I go that, like, the general population believes murder is bad. And that's what a law is to me, it's a signal that the general population thinks this is not cool. Because ultimately, what is a law? You get arrested, you go to court, you sit in front of a jury of your peers. Do those peers think that you were a bad dude? Because they don't know the law. It's how you explain the law to them. It's how the prosecutor explains the law to them. You're telling them what the law is, and then they're telling you, well, based on what you told me, this is what I think. This is how much I trusted you, and this is how much I trusted you, and together I acclimated them and decided, fuck you, guy. Like, and so really, like, any law is just saying that, like, most people here would probably not be cool with you doing that. But none is an actual symbol of this doesn't happen here. Like, not even in prison can they say that, like, I can make a place where this doesn't happen. It's just not how humans work. But I think it's important to be able to signal particularly strong things. Like, so if you signal that drugs are generally not accepted here, like, then you just put all the people who are here who do accept drugs in a greater danger, because now, like, yeah, they could go to court and still win, but it's still annoying. And so like now they end up like, you end up with a high school problem of like, a lot of high schoolers get arrested for smoking and driving.
Yep.
A lot of high schoolers live with parents who say smoking weed isn't cool. And so a lot of high schoolers get weed from their friend or sketchy associate and then say, well, I can't smoke at home or my mom would be really mad at me. So I better get in the car and I can't stop at the park because if I smoke in the park, well, then the police or whoever will be really mad at me and I can't go smoke in that parking lot because if you loiter in a parking lot, then the police would be really mad at me. So where's the one place that I'm sovereign? In my car. That's the one place I'm sovereign. That's the one place that I could just do my thing without anyone just being really mad at me. And you wonder why kids get in the car and smoke and drive is because their parents aren't cool with them just doing it at home. You might not agree that your kid smokes, and you might want to have a talk with them about the fact that they smoke. But if you tell them you can't smoke here, you are actually putting your child in way greater danger than them having an interest in weed. And you should approach things like that differently. Like, as a society, we should approach the fact that a lot of people want to smoke weed differently than just saying, but we said that most of us don't agree. Like, yeah, you said it, but like, that's not the case. And so I think that laws that are not heavily supported shouldn't be made into laws because they just add a certain amount of confusion and danger to any act that is just kind of illegal.
Mm-hmm. I see your point. I see what you're saying. So do any of these restrictions do anything other than signaling?
No, everything's signaling. Like, because at the end of the day, like, the cops aren't crime prevention. They are crime follow-up. You know, you get stabbed on the subway, they're not jumping on to save you, but they'll sure investigate the guy once he's left. You know, and so you end up with this like time distinction that a lot of people like to view things as like justice, like yeah, but I got the Constitution on my side. Well, like, that's great, but you're going to spend 30 days in jail because you can't get bail, and for whatever reason, no one picked up when you tried to call them, and like now you're, there's just so many time delays in the actual application of the things that we view as instantaneous. And so it causes a lot of problems in how we view like things getting solved. Like, we want things to be fixed right away, and they can't be. And because of that, a lot of people just get frustrated that people take a small step. Like, I found that a lot of people are not into certain things because they feel like, but it doesn't totally solve the problem. And a lot of things aren't about solving the problem, but setting a trajectory that's actually going to go somewhere. One of the biggest problems about presidents in my lifetime, I find, is that they come in wanting to leave a mark. They have something to prove. And like, that probably has something to do with becoming president. Like, most people don't want to become president. But like, they come in, they want to prove something, and then they end up doing all these executive orders to get something done that ultimately isn't sticking. The point of an executive order is to say, I don't have enough support to do this, but I really need to do it for a little while. That's why it's an executive order. It's not lasting. That's not voted through Congress, That's barely enforced. And so that's why you have these really old laws that we seem to not be able to get our way around. Yet these new laws, every time someone new comes around, they're like, and we're going to tear down that law that they passed last year, and we're going to pass a new law, a new way to do this, because I slightly disagree about it. And I think the big problem is that politicians forgot that what they are isn't the person who's in charge of the boat, but they are the person who needs to get all of the captains on the same page about which way the boat is going. Because every election, everyone's re-choosing. Every election, everyone's recycling. What your job as president is not to leave a bill that changes the way America works. Your job as president is to talk to the American public, have a dialogue, and leave them feeling that they are confident with the direction that the country is going. You convince them that this is the best way to solve this thing. Here, I consider this. I consider that. don't you think that this is the best way forward? So we experimented in this state, and then we had a B test in this state. And based on us leveraging the fact that we have 50 small science experiment centers going on, we deduced that this was the most effective way. So we're going to roll that out to a 20-state section, and that 20 states is going to try this second best one while this one tries its first, and we'll see if at a larger scale, you can science that shit. And we have the tools to science that shit. And people believe science when it's actual science. When you say, and I tried to prove that wrong. I tried to ruin the economy. I sent in a dude who was just rich as fuck to just like try to buy out all the homes. And like that didn't work there. And this was the most effective strategy of stopping that. And like we tried it. And like that's what the country should be doing, is we should be proving to people that like, hey, on a small scale, I tried these things and this is where we found it was effective, and so we're growing this out. But nobody wants to put in the legwork. Everyone wants to be seen and be famous. Mm-hmm. And it's like, you'll be seen and have a legacy if when you leave, people are still talking about Trumpism, because it changed the way that we fundamentally act as a society, because you showed me how I should value doing this. And I haven't let us change course because I'm the captain, and no one's come in since then and convinced me that this is a bad course. Right.
And so back to the experiment thing, I think that's an interesting analogy, because I think we're seeing that with things like legalization of marijuana,
Totally.
Where did it hit first? Oregon and Colorado and stuff. And like, civilizations didn't collapse.
No.
They got a lot of state funding for a lot of other things that they want to do, and people saw that kind of worked. Nothing terrible happened, and a lot of people are getting on board.
People saw that the DA didn't immediately raid all their illegal, like they did, but they didn't, and like there was enough that like people were like, I could kind of see that this is like figuring it out, and that's how change is made. Ultimately, like people are really scared of change, and like you can't just say every 4 years that like everything is gonna change, because you get people stressed. And like, I watch too much Yang, but Yang points out that when people are stressed, their IQ goes down, their ability to make rational decisions gets worse. And so if you encourage a really stressed out society, then you're encouraging a society which is not thinking to the best of their ability. And that should be something that a president tries to minimize. He should not be trying to frighten or stress the citizenship. He shouldn't be trying to turn it up, like turn up the like peaceful harmony, we're working together to build a great thing, like turn up the work jazz, and like, yeah man, like we're building a country, but like don't turn up the like fuck everyone, like it's just all dumb, like it's all dumb.
I think I'm looking forward to seeing how the psilocybin thing plays out too. Like if that's going to follow a similar trajectory that marijuana has, where it's going to be used medically, and certain states will kind of lead the charge with that. And then whether something like that will be available recreationally or available within clinics as like treatment. I'm interested to see how that plays out, because I think like marijuana can be a powerful medicine. I think that can be an even more powerful medicine, and I'm interested to see where that goes.
I think that we won't see a non-medical version for a long time, is my thought, just because like the police aren't ready for that. They're not prepared well.
Probably a good thing. It is a powerful thing and should be treated as very carefully.
Yeah. And that's the slow rollout. Once you have more medical patients who are more like, well, like not, like, I don't know. I feel like there are ways to get around. Like they might possibly do some kind of like pill that you could get that is like, you could break it down into a pill already, like the capsule mushrooms.
Right.
And like at that point, like they could maybe like make it so that there's not enough, and then there's something else in it that if you do like 50 of them, it'll react weird in you. So like you could only microdose this, like don't eat a whole bottle or it'll make you vomit. Like, but like, I don't know. I'm sure that there's some way, but like I haven't thought of it yet.
Yeah. And then on a kind of tangential note here, a little more fun, I recently learned about some of the origins of the Christmas traditions.
Oh, I'd love to hear them.
So I guess the first question I'll kind of ask you is like, why do we bring an evergreen pine tree into our house? Any idea?
So I'm Jewish. I will not have a lot of this Christian lore down. But so, like, if I were to imagine, you bring a pine tree in because you wanted to feel like you were outside, but it's really fucking cold. So you brought a tree inside because like you didn't have TVs and stuff. So you were like, ha ha ha, we're outside, we got a tree.
Yeah, maybe. But so I learned this the other day and it completely blew my mind. And I've been telling everybody that'll listen about it since. So it has to do with mushrooms.
Of course.
So where to begin? So first of all, the holiday is obviously like a smashing together of like pagan traditions and like Christian theology, right? Like it's centered around Jesus, but like that's also obviously very connected with the winter solstice and the celebration of that, and like lots of pagan traditions are. But the specific details of the Christmas traditions never really made any sense to me until I heard this what they're calling the Santa the Siberian Shaman.
Ooh.
So basically how it went was, I don't know how many thousands of years ago this was, but, and they still practice this in some parts of Siberia and other places close to the North Pole, it turns out. But anyway, what they would do is around the winter solstice, it was known that Amanita muscaria, I think if I'm saying that correctly, this mushroom, which is like the classical red mushroom with like the white dots on it that you see in like toad and like, all over pop culture, like the red mushroom with the white dots. So this would grow underneath evergreen trees in northern climates, and it would grow around, it would emerge around the winter solstice. So a tradition came where these shamans would dress like the mushroom in a bright red suit with like white trimming. They would harvest the mushroom from underneath the tree, like presents under the tree. They would hang it on the tree and let it kind of dry out in the sunlight as like almost like ornaments, And then they would put all the mushrooms in a big sack. They would carry that sack, often on drawn by sled, and they would bring it to the townspeople, right? And
yeah, totally.
Because this time of the year it was a lot of snowfall, their doors would often be snowed in, so they would have to enter the home through the smoke hole. So this guy in a bright red suit comes with this sack down the smoke hole and gives you these presents, these mushrooms, right? And then what the people would do is they would put the mushrooms in a stocking and they would hang it by the fire in order to further dry it out to remove some of the toxins while preserving some of the psychoactive ingredients, and this also connects with like the naughty and nice list too, because if you were good all year and you're on the nice list, you would have this psychoactive experience from ingesting the mushroom and you'd have a good trip. Like you'd be good, but if you didn't, all this bad shit would come back to you and you'd have a bad trip,
I don't care what like the real story of Christmas is. Like as far as I'm concerned, that's canon. Like, damn.
Yes.
That's what it should be.
There's at least one more detail, and it has to do with the reindeer.
Okay.
So first of all, it makes sense that we're sort of worshiping reindeer. I mean, they were probably critical to survival, especially in northern climates, that you would create a tradition around celebrating the reindeer.
Yeah.
But the reindeer love the mushroom.
Yeah.
They eat the mushroom and they like frolic.
Like even still, like, can you like go to Norway and watch like tripping reindeer?
Mm-hmm. So you can even like imagine the reindeer like bending down and eating this bright red mushroom, and you can almost see it there, like at his nose, like this bright red bulb at his nose as he's picking that up, So the mushrooms would enjoy, the reindeer would eat the mushrooms, and then people figured out that you could follow the reindeer and you could collect its urine, and you can trip off the urine because the reindeer kind of filters out some of the toxic ingredients, but passes through a lot of the psychoactive ingredients.
People think of the weirdest drugs. Reindeer pee, reindeer pee, reindeer pee.
And then the last piece is like the elves. Like, what is the deal with the elves? Like, why are the elves there? And I've never experienced this personally, but apparently there's like a common thing that people experience when they do certain psychoactive.
The elves.
They see the space elves. They like interact with the space elves, whether you're in like the DMT realm or whatever, and like that might be the
elves, man.
So Isn't that the craziest shit you ever heard? Like, I can't, like,
That's the most believable shit I've ever heard. Like, I've heard a lot of unbelievable, like, religious origin stories. That's the one, like,
yeah. So
bro.
then, like, you had like Saint Nicholas, who was like part of the Christian world, sort of, right? And that was like he kind of adopted what these Siberian shamans were doing. Like, he took on their garb with like the red suit and the white dots, and like practiced the tradition of giving presents and like around the winter solstice, and then it kind of all became commercialized into the Coca-Cola version of Christmas that we enjoy today. Or don't.
And, next Christmas, make sure to give your loved ones some dried mushrooms on over an open fire,
Exactly.
The real Christmas spirit.
Yeah. And then there's like so many little things, but like when Santa or the Siberian shaman would come down the smoke hole and give you these mushrooms, in exchange for that, you would like feed him.
Yeah.
Like leaving milk and cookies, and
Yeah,
he'd
man.
get all nice and plump. And that's why he's a
Got
fat,
my cookie on.
and he had this long beard, and he was often like an older guy, and
Yeah.
out with the reindeer. Crazy.
That's cool.
Santa the Siberian shaman.
Yeah, man. Like, the Siberian Shaman, man.
That's wild, isn't it?
Dude, that's like, that's my favorite story I've ever heard about Christmas.
Oh my god, I love you. That's awesome.
I can't wait for them to make that movie. Like,
Yeah.
Frosty the Shaman was a very sorry man. He tripped his balls and fell some malls and then jumped through the.
It feels good to tell somebody who like actually cares. Like, I probably told like 10 people, and like 9 of them were like, yeah, and.
But like that just makes so much sense. Like, I just know that every like major weird historical story like started from someone in like just like an altered state of mind. Mm-hmm. People have been getting fucked up for a while. You think they didn't have like fucked up beer recipes? Like, how many things did they try that just didn't work out? Oh, that's poisonous. Wow.
Yeah.
Did y'all see those elves?
Yeah, that's epic.
That's
and
cool.
I'm obsessed with like all this stuff that happened before we ever wrote stuff down.
Yeah.
Like most of human history was that way.
Yeah.
Following around herds of animals and being hunter-gatherers and like living in small tribal communities, and like we're so far removed from that, and like anytime I can like talk about what that was like, or like try to make my life more like it was then, feels like it just makes me happier ultimately,
Yeah. Well, like it can be, yeah. Like, I think that these days we, particularly like us earlier age of the internet,
Mm-hmm.
we're really some of the first to traverse it like for the majority of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And no one prior to our generations really has had to deal with the consequences of past them. Like, ultimately in the past you did stuff, you said stuff, unless you wrote a book or like put in great energy to publish something.
Mm-hmm.
Like, basically everything was forgotten immediately. Like, everything was just gone.
Yeah.
Everything was not public. And so now we have all these anchors to our past. And what's interesting is it's making the past more relevant to today. Whereas it used to be like, you live a few years, you live and forget. You live and you learn. You live and you move on. Only
Right.
Time heals all wounds. All these like metaphors come from a place in which people forget. And that simply is something we actively prevent these days. We seek to have these things last forever, outlast ourselves. And it's like we've frozen these moments in time and bound ourselves to them. And I feel that can be a bit limiting in terms of trajectory. When no one really has expectations of you, or when their expectations are vague, it's easier for you to shift trajectory without people adding a significant amount of resistance. And so when you're more of a mystery to people, it's easier for you to simply duck where you need to duck. But nowadays, like, your cousin's uncle's dog walker, has seen your Facebook, and like you go to something and you see him at the mall, and they're like, oh yeah, I saw you were doing whatever. Like, how's that going for you? And now you just have to be like, oh, I stopped doing that, now I like started doing, but instead you're just like, yeah, it's going great. It's going great. And
Yeah.
and you try to like justify all these like pastnesses because it's not worth it to try to explain that life changes. Because people don't get life changes. People are still very much like, but I just saw that video yesterday. And again, we're very bad at separating this like time context of things.
Mm-hmm.
Like people are just not good at that. And so we need to figure out what like the social norms are. I read a book that was really interesting
Yeah.
about it's called The Age of M, and it's basically the sociologist tries to envision the world through human cloned brains. So not human cloned brains, sorry, that's a bad way of putting it. Brain emulations. He basically argues that before true AI exists, it'll be easier rather than to figure out how one thinks to just make something that does the exact same thing as someone who already thinks. Like basically just like cast a mold of your mental model and allow that to just like it knows the pattern, but it doesn't know why the pattern is.
Uh-huh.
And his argument was basically like, so before we make mental ones, we'll have these brain emulations. And this book, just like, so the whole concept is we have a bunch of brains that have been cloned into a digital space, but they're still people and they think like people, but they're computers. So they can split up and join back together. And so the more of you running, the faster you can learn things. But if you learn things, you only have a certain amount of memory, so you have to choose what you start to forget over time, because if you have too much energy, it takes you longer to think of specific things because your searches are less elastic. And so they keep going on this line, but basically it ends up being like, these things are computers. They're going to have to interact with other programs, and those other programs are going to, like, see them. Like, there's no, like, hiding your data to an extent, like, they're going to know shit that you didn't tell them. And that's something that people experience all the time. And it basically said, like, the brain emulations are going to have to go through a period of time where they figure out what is the social norm for pretending like you don't know that the person who's telling you one thing is actually doing another, because it is polite to interact with people the way they present themselves. And this whole book is dropping weird bombs like that.
Yeah.
That's just like really getting you to think. And so I don't think it's necessarily like an accurate picture of what the future will look like, but just looking at someone who's viewed human interaction and seeing them try to apply that to computer chips puts things in a really neat. Like one of the most fascinating things that was mentioned was death, and they basically said, some programs have to run really fast, some programs have to run really slow. And so, like, the programs that are running really fast aren't going to want to hang out with the programs that are running really slow, because, like, the lag, and, you don't want to interact with someone who's not moving at your speed.
Yeah.
And so, like, generally, classes will form. You'll form your social network around other beings or other brain emulations moving in the same speed class as you. Because which I tend to equate less to wealth and more to just like hours, your work hours. Whatever your work hours are really sets who you hang out with outside of work hours.
Yeah.
And so I thought, but so then it gets into death. So when you die, you just start moving really slowly. Because you still have processing power, you just like don't have a lot of wealth, so you run it very slowly. You put very few electricity at a time. You're not very high powered, and because you're moving so slow, everyone just ignores you, and you get so ignored that you just fade from vision. You know how like your mind naturally removes your nose? It's just moving so slow. It's just always there. Like I don't need to. And so like the dead are just still like there. These programs still exist, and they're still watching as like these ghost programs that are watching all these things zip by them while they like slowly just like.
Whoa.
Right.
I'm trying to like wrap my head around what you're talking about, but the one thing it reminded me of is like Asperger's. I've been doing some research on Asperger's recently, and it's like it seems like men and women kind of deal with it differently. But something that women do, it makes it harder to identify that they have Asperger's, is mimicking. So they observe social behavior, and instead of like doing it naturally because it's like natural to them, they just mimic it. They're just like copying other people and like overlaying that onto their own being to like seem socially acceptable. Is that sort of like similar to what the emulators you think are doing, or help me understand it a little bit more? Like, are they mimicking, or because you're saying they don't understand why they're doing it, they're just doing it?
Oh no, they very much understand. They're very conscious beings, you know, like to an extent, you know, they're robots. But like very much they are the clone of the process of a thought. And so like, and because that they're real people, they have these deaths where like it's not like we're just kill you and like turn off your computer, like all right, you're retiring. And so the whole argument is that these brain clones will want time to not think for you. Like I get that I'm a thinking robot, but like I want to imagine some me time and I could go to virtual place, but like you have to earn a wage to be able to pay to travel the bits to get to where they store the vacation files. You know, like and basically, like another really interesting thing from it was they mentioned city design, and they basically talked about how, you know, in the world today we build cities with certain expectations around the length of time in which a building will exist, and that robots would actually probably due to like advancing technology, they like to like break things down and build them up again as they like upgrade stuff, because lots of upgrades they're going to be constantly, and so they would have less long lasting buildings, but that they would be able to make them more structurally sound because they'd be working together while building them to like lean on each other, and they could get more interesting density setups. But I guess basically what's interesting about it is that like we see these Australian wildfires, and like we have a certain structure for how we build homes. We're seeing a lot of increased global destruction. And what I think that's going to lead to is a completely different style of city building where we build expecting the next disaster. We say, how do I build this so that when it burns down, it's easy to build it back up?
Right.
You know, you always have to have something that can pack and evade and rebuild. Because like that's how we're gonna have to start thinking about our building structures. Is like, well, I know a storm's gonna come in and destroy this. Like, you know, we could rebuild Puerto Rico, but like fact of the matter is like there's gonna be more hurricanes coming through that are only gonna get worse. And so like if we rebuild it, like are we rebuilding it with the same plan the last ones were built to? And if so, that seems like a large waste of money. What we should really be focusing a lot of our efforts on is what kind of housing structures, what kind of building structures we can make that can either just like cost enough that they can just be destroyed every X years, and we can just build a new one and not feel the hit, or something that we have to be able to salvage, have to be able to save, have to be able to make it something that can either withstand or be salvaged well enough that we could rebuild later.
Almost like related to like planned obsolescence. Like,
yeah,
you know,
exactly.
This computer that you're on is like, 10 years, 5 years from now, it's going to be like not really relevant, not really useful, probably half dead, and you're better off just replacing it and recycling the old parts.
Yeah, exactly. Like, why do we keep trying to fix this house that like keeps getting flooded? Like, let's just build like a stilt house now. All right, cool. Now we've adapted. You know, we've planned for the fact that this flood is coming, and so now we've adapted our structure to be able to handle it better, and maybe be something that, in particular, like virus regions, is just built to be very like they 3D print hemp houses now. Like, imagine that future market. Like, if you could 3D print a hemp house, it's not as beautiful as some of the California mansions that exist. Sure, you know, I'll give them that. That shit's nice. Yeah. But like, if I just had my house burned down and I knew that I could build a new one out of hemp, and I then had that house burned down the following year for the next fire that comes, I'm going to feel a lot less shitty about my house burned down. Oh yeah, that shit, I 3D printed hemp in 2 days, bitch. Like, all right, I was able to pack all my shit because my shit's designed that I know it's going to burn down. It's going to burn down. It's hemp. It's not going to leave crazy, like, smelly shit all over my yard. And then I'm just going to build a new hemp house with my 3D printer thing, you know?
Huh. What is this whole concept called? I said planned obsolescence, but it's not that exactly.
So it's a concept about robots building cities in a robot book. I don't know what the real term is, you know? But, like, yeah, planned obsolescence, but, like, of housing and how you strategize, like, when you build a structure, you have an idea of how long it will exist. And I think that we're moving to a place where we've been very cocky. People are building the world's tallest towers every other year.
Yeah.
And a lot of this is not built for like, well, what happens if like a real, like, if shit hits the fan?
Mm-hmm.
Like in New York, they are still trying to figure out how to like close down subways to fix the L train, and then they pulled some shady shit where people in power, they said, all right, well, like, we're gonna close down the L, like, it's gonna close, we're giving you 2 years notice, it's gonna close, and everyone depends on the L. A lot of people moved, a lot of people sold their houses really cheap. No one is buying houses in a place that's about to not have a subway for an undisclosed amount of time. And then the day that they were supposed to ban the subway, they said, we talked to the people. They really don't want this thing shut down, so we're just going to leave it open. By the way, we knew about this plan a little while ago, so we bought a bunch of stuff while y'all were selling cheap.
Is that insider trading, technically?
It is, but it's just like, what you going to do? It's just corruption. And ideally, you wash out that corruption by pumping more money into it. But really, you just need these subways to be built in a way that we know there's going to be shit coming through, pumping it full of salt water. That shit should just be quickly, easily repairable, designed to be able to handle that kind of stuff. And the fact of the matter is that we're not building these things with disaster in mind. We're very much saying, the 100-year storm, hasn't happened in 100 years, probably not 100 more, right? We're good.
Yeah, that's not how that works. So we're running out of time here. I want to give us one more question, and then we can wrap it up. So we got the 2020 presidential election right around the corner. Not really, but it'll be here before we know. You mentioned Yang. Is he still one of the top? He's
still in it. He's still pulling in. He just pulled in a lot of money this weekend. I'm actually going to like a rally tomorrow night. But basically, like, my thought on everything is that, like, Yang is the real deal because Republicans like to talk about minimizing governance, right? Like, there's a lot of people in America who fetishize minimal governance. And that's the thing. People really don't want government, like heavy administration.
Right.
And then you have Yang, who comes in and says, I'm going to deliver on a lot of democratic points. I'm going to, help people, but in a way that does it through minimal administrative effort. And that is the way to maximize the benefit to the people. A lot of people want, jobs guarantees. Like Medicare for All has a jobs guarantee. And like, that sounds nice on paper, but when it's a jobs guarantee, okay, so you got a job, right? And like, it's probably not a good job, right? And like, you don't like your manager, right? So you quit to be rehired by the jobs program. Like, what do they, like, there's some kind of structure there, and it's likely going to lead to you being told, this is your job. Do you want it? And you have to, because there's no other aid available, because we just said that the only way to get this now is to be our slave working this shitty job.
Yeah.
And like, I don't think that that's the marketplace of ideas I want to subscribe to. But like, Andrew Yang, on the other hand, says, we don't need to build this jobs guarantee. If we just give people money, they'll spend it with people who are near them. Like, people want to be buying shit. They want, and if people around you have money, then you can start a business. Like, no one around you has money, you can't start a business. Like, all your friends are poor. Like, what are you going to do? Open a lemonade stand and not get any customers? But like, if all your friends have like a bit of money because they're getting this dividend, like, then they might support your business. They might be more willing to make those kinds of local purchases. And particularly, they might be able to get more people moving to places that are not necessarily hot job centers. Like, there's a lot of people have dreams of doing particular things. Or, so I guess I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but so Andrew Yang looks to say, I'm going to do something and do it with the way that it is most effectively implemented. So on one hand, you could say, I want a wealth tax. Or let's even just strictly talk about his, because a lot of people have criticisms about how it's working. So $1,000 a month to every adult over 18. But why do the rich get it? Well, we could say the rich don't get it, right? Well, then what would we have to do? Well, then we'd have to measure everyone's wealth. We'd have to send out an inspector and say, hey, how wealthy are you? And then every month or whatever, you'd have to answer some questions about your wealth. Like, is that what you want to do? Or do you want to just say, I get $1,000 a month, and if that rich guy gets it, he's actually donating more than that 1,000 a month. So, like, that's probably chill anyway. And now I don't have to deal with people. I have no one to answer to. I don't have to fill out forms, and there's nothing that can happen that takes this away from me. And I think that's a really empowering thing to say that now I don't have to stress about acquiring this money. I have an economic floor, which allows me to move into places that might be cheaper to live, that might have less jobs, because now maybe I can start that farm because I know I can at least eat. Or I can start that, art garage thing that I was going to build up for a while because I know I can at least eat. And if you have these people moving to these more rural places because it's cheaper to live, to work on these, basically how cities work, right? Like, people have minimum amount of money and access to income. And as long as you can have some kind of access to income, if you make that a national thing, then it becomes, where are people going to move? They're going to move to these rural ass areas. They can own bigger property.
Yeah.
And once there are people there that have a certain amount of money, well then, supermarkets are going to come up. Or not supermarkets, but like whatever. Whatever is going to come up. All those things that they're missing in these small towns, well, now that they have money and can buy things, and that their neighbors have money, and that they have like this property that's attractive, a lot of people are going to choose to move out of the city and make life for themselves there. And as that kind of sprawl happens, then people are going to, start more businesses, start really trickling up. And he does that because he doesn't say, well, we're going to check everything and we're going to dot all our I's and figure out exactly how much you own. And
that makes sense.
He says, no, I don't have to do anything. I just have to say, everyone goes, and then it's done. And there's so little effort that all of that is going to the people. Whereas everything else goes to this guy who's checking and that guy who's checking and this administrator. Andrew Yang says, let's just give it all to the people. And I have a way that takes out all of the middlemen.
Wow.
And that's something that I think is going to pull a lot of people from the right as well. Like, it accomplishes the left's goal in a way that the right's cool with doing things. And I think that's powerful. And it sets a trajectory of we don't tell our poor how to live. It's a freedom dividend. You can spend it however you want. Whereas, these other plans, a lot of them have restrictions built into, well, if we're giving you a guaranteed job, how long is it till they say, well, you can't spend that on drugs.
Right.
Because we're and this is kind of really pushing that line of it's yours to do what you want with you're in charge of it. And I really like that paradigm shift.
Meir, I could talk to you for another 4 hours, I think, dude, but they're kicking me out of the library.
Yeah, I saw. I'm sorry to hold you up, man.
Oh, man, it's great.
I had a great time.
I appreciated it, and this is good, man. And we should talk more, and especially if I'm trying to put a team together to launch this thing. So as momentum goes down the road, I'm going to be thinking about you, and we can connect.
Yeah, man. I hear you're in Jersey?
I was.
Oh, okay. Well, then we'll stay in touch digitally then.
Sounds good.
All right.
Keep it real, Meir. Good talk.
Keep it real. Yeah, have a good one.
All right, peace, brother.